All right, we're going to pull back the curtain on one of the greatest business partnerships in history, so we can really get inside the mind of the man who helped build an empire.
When you think of Berkshire Hathaway, one name immediately pops into your head, right? Warren Buffett. But what if I told you the real key, the secret to understanding their unbelievable success lies with someone else? A person who, for the most part, operated behind the scenes. And that person is Charlie Munger. See, while Buffett was the public face of the company, the icon everybody knows, Munger was the intellectual architect. He was the one whose unique way of thinking was the very foundation for their success. He was, without a doubt, the other half of the equation.
So, how did he do it? Well, here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with his role at Berkshire, then jump back to his early days in Omaha. We'll look at his big career shift from law to investing, then dive deep into his unique Munger method, and finally, we'll talk about the incredible legacy of wisdom he left behind. Okay, so first things first, let's get to know the man often called Warren Buffett's silent partner.
So officially, his name was Charles T. Munger, and his title was Vice Chairman of Berkshire Hathaway. But that title, it just doesn't even begin to cover it. He was Buffett's most trusted confidant, a totally brilliant investor in his own right, and a deep thinker whose wisdom really shaped the DNA of the entire company. You see, to really get Munger the investor, you have to go back, way back. You have to understand Munger the kid from Omaha, because his entire philosophy was forged right there. So Munger was born in Omaha back in 1924. And get this, in a crazy twist of fate. As a teenager, he actually worked at a grocery store owned by, wait for it, Warren Buffett's grandfather. After serving in the Army Air Corps during the war, he went on to Harvard Law and graduated with high honors.
And what's so cool is how these seemingly small experiences just compounded over time. That tough grocery store job, it gave him an absolutely unbreakable work ethic. He read everything he could get his hands on, especially science and medicine, and that built the foundation for his analytical mind. And believe it or not, even trading hamsters as a kid taught him a thing or two about negotiation.
Now, despite being a successful lawyer, Munger knew deep down that his real passion was somewhere else, and this led to a huge pivot, one that would change his life and, frankly, the world of finance forever.
He had this realization, right? He felt like he was operating inside a box, kind of like what you see on the left. A lawyer's job is to win an argument within a given set of rules. But an investor has to understand the whole system, the business, the industry, human psychology, you name it, to find the real opportunities. Munger wanted to see that bigger picture. And that brings us to the moment where everything just clicked. A chance meeting back home in Omaha brought him face to face with a young Warren Buffett. They figured out almost immediately that they spoke the exact same language when it came to investing. And right there, one of the most successful partnerships in history was born.
Okay, so what was the secret sauce? What was the magic behind his thinking? It all came down to this powerful framework for making decisions that he called worldly wisdom. So what in the world is worldly wisdom? Well, it's not about being an expert in just one thing. Instead, he said you should build a latticework of mental models in your head. It's about taking the big, proven ideas from all the major fields, psychology, physics, history, and using them together to see a problem from all sides. For example, Munger often used a model called inversion. Instead of asking how to achieve success, he'd flip it and ask, what could cause me to fail? Then he would just work like hell to avoid those things. It's a totally different way of looking at a problem. So how does this big picture wisdom actually turn into action? Well, it pretty much boils down to 4 key principles. First, be absolutely, ruthlessly rational. Emotions have no place in big decisions. Second, understand things deeply. This is his famous circle of competence idea. Know what you know, and just as important, know what you don't know. Third, always play the long game. And finally, number 4, when you find a truly great idea inside that circle, don't just dip your toe in, concentrate your resources and bet big.
And this quote, man, it just perfectly sums up his entire philosophy. If you only have one tool in your mental toolkit or one way of looking at the world, you are going to mess things up constantly. Munger's whole goal was to have a full toolkit so he could see the world as it actually is, not how he wanted it to be.
But Munger's story doesn't just end with making a ton of money. Not even close. For him, the real point was using that wealth, and more importantly that wisdom, to make a real, lasting impact. I mean, the guy was a massive philanthropist, especially when it came to education, giving huge sums to places like Stanford. But beyond the money, his real legacy is the standard he set.
He and Buffett built one of the world's greatest companies on a foundation of ethics, friendship, and pure rationality, proving that those are the most valuable business assets you can possibly have.
And that brings us to our final thought. Munger never stopped looking for new ideas to make his own thinking better. So, as you think about his approach, the real question he would probably ask you is this: what is the most useful idea you've heard about today that you aren't putting to work in your own life yet?